daughter showed up at my door crying. And before she even said a word, I knew she had found the thing I never wanted her to see. Her small car was still running in my driveway, headlights cutting through the thick snow that fell like a curtain over our town. She stood there on my porch, trembling, her face red from the wind and from something far deeper than the cold. "Mom," she whispered, wiping her wet cheeks with shaking hands. I know what really happened to Dad." The world seemed to stop. The storm, the wind, the cold, everything disappeared for a second, leaving only the sound of my own heartbeat pounding in my ears. I opened the door wider, my hands suddenly weak. "Come inside," I said softly. "Please." She stepped in, snow melting off her coat, and I guided her toward the living room. The fire in the fireplace was the only warmth in the house. Power lines were down from the storm, plunging the neighborhood into darkness. The flicker in the light made her face look even more fragile. She sat down slowly, as if unsure whether her legs could support her weight. For a long moment, she didn't speak. She stared at the flames, breathing in short, uneven breaths. When she finally looked at me, her eyes were red, more broken than I'd seen her since she was a child. "I found the box," she said. My chest tightened. Not that box. Not the one I thought I had had well enough to remain untouched forever. I wasn't looking for anything, she continued. I was cleaning the attic and it just fell open. The letters, the doctor's notes, the journal. Her voice cracked. "You wrote everything, Mom, every night, every detail. And you never told me any of it." I felt myself shrinking into my chair, the weight of decades pressing on my chest. "You weren't supposed to find that," I whispered. She shook her head slowly. "Why? Why did you hide it from me?" I closed my eyes. It was a question I had asked myself 1,000 times over the years, but the answer was always tangled, complicated, painful. "You were so young," I said softly. "You adored him and want you to remember him sick and want your memories filled with hospitals and fear." She bit her lip, tears spilling again. "So instead you let me think he abandoned us?" The word stabbed through me, because that's exactly what she believed. And I let her believe it. I let her carry the confusion, the guilt of resentment, just to protect her from the truth that felt too heavy for a child. I thought it was kinder, I said softly. I thought someday I'd explain. When you were older, when I was stronger. "You had 30 years, she whispered. "Why didn't you ever tell me?" My voice broke, because every time I tried, I saw the little girl who used to wait by the window for him to come home. "You weren't a little girl anymore." "No," I said, but I still saw her. I think I always did. She turned back to the fire, watching the flames dance as if searching for answers hidden inside the light. Outside, the wind slammed against the house, making the window shake. After a long silence, she asked the question I had feared most. "What happened to him, Mom?" "The truth. All of it." I took a deep breath. Slow, shaky. And I began. I stayed with them every night. Every single night. After you went to bed. He didn't look at me, but I knew she was listening. He didn't want you to see him that way. He didn't want to scare you. So we pretended everything was normal during the day. But at night, he would wake up coughing, gasping, gripping my hand until he couldn't feel his fingers anymore. I paused. swallowing the lump in my throat. I held him while he cried. He was afraid. Afraid of leaving you. Afraid of hurting you. But he was also afraid of you seeing him fade away. A tear slid down her cheek. You never told me he cried. Oh, of course he did. He loved you more than anything. She covered a mouth, stifling a sob. He wrote to you every night. Those letters you found, they were for your future, for the moments he knew he wouldn't be there to see. She nodded slowly. I read them. I felt my heart twist. I'm sorry you had to find them alone. She clenched her fists. Why didn't you give them to me? Because reading them meant accepting he was gone and I wasn't ready. I thought you weren't either. She wiped her eyes again. So what did you do with everything? I hid it. I admitted it, like a coward. I put it all in that box and told myself I'd show you someday, but someday never came, and then too much time had passed. I didn't know how to start the conversation anymore. Her breath trembled. And when I was old enough to ask what happened, you told me he left. I felt myself break a little more. That was the biggest mistake I ever made. He didn't leave us, she said, her voice shaking. He was dying, and I hated him for nothing. I reached over and gently touched her hand. She didn't pull away. You were a child, I whispered. You filled the silence with the only explanation that made sense to you, and I was too scared to correct you. We sat silently for a long time. The fire cracked. The storm screamed outside, and inside, between us, something fragile shifted. Quietly, she spoke again. Can you tell me what happened at the end? I nodded. Last night, he asked me to promise something. He turned toward me, eyes wide. He asked me to tell you the truth someday, to tell you everything, to let you know he fought as hard as he could to stay. She covered her face with both hands and cried, deep, aching sobs that came from years of confusion and unanswered questions. I wrapped our arms around her, holding her the way I used to when she was small. She leaned into me, shaking, letting everything pour out. I thought he didn't love me,
she said between sobs. All those years, I thought he didn't want me. Sweetheart, I whispered, my voice breaking. You were the thing he wanted most. She cried harder. And as I held her, I felt something inside both of us finally release. Years of silence melting away like snow under warm hands. When she finally calmed, she rested her head on my shoulder, breathing slowly, deeply. Mom, she said softly, thank you for telling me. I should have told you sooner, I said. Maybe, she whispered, but I'm glad I know now. I'm glad we can talk about him. We sat like that for a long time, watching the fire fade, listening to the storm soften outside. And for the first time in decades, I didn't feel afraid of the past anymore. On the coldest night of the year, my daughter didn't just learn the truth. She brought us both out of the silence we've lived in for far too long.